Every month for 7 years, my husband David told me he had to go on business trips for his consulting job. He'd kiss me goodbye at the airport, text me from different cities, send photos of hotel rooms and conference badges. I trusted him completely. We had 2 kids, a beautiful house in Seattle, and what I thought was a rock-solid marriage. But last month, when his company called me looking for him because he missed an important meeting, I realized he had never actually been on any of those trips. What I discovered when I followed the real location of his phone destroyed everything I believed about the man I married, and revealed a secret so close to home, it made me question every single day of our life together. My name is Rachel. I'm 36 years old. I work part-time as a pediatric nurse in Seattle. My husband David is 38, a senior consultant at a mid-sized tech consulting firm. We've been married for 11 years and have 2 wonderful kids. Mia is 9 and Lucas is 6. Our life looked like the kind of marriage people envy on Instagram. We lived in a cozy 3-bedroom house in Ballard with a small backyard where the kids played. Every morning, I made breakfast while David helped the kids get ready for school. He'd kiss me on the forehead, tell me he loved me, and head to the office. On weekends, we did family things. Soccer games for Lucas, dance class for Mia, Sunday brunch at our favorite cafe downtown. David was the kind of husband who remembered anniversaries, brought flowers just because, and never forgot to text me when he was running late. But every month, like clockwork, he had business trips. They started about 7 years ago, shortly after Lucas was born. David said his company was expanding and he had to visit clients in different cities, sometimes Portland, sometimes San Francisco, sometimes Denver. He would leave on a Thursday evening and come back Sunday night. He always brought small gifts for the kids, a keychain from the airport, a stuffed animal, or a t-shirt with the city name. For me, he brought coffee from local shops, or a piece of jewelry he said he found in a little boutique. He'd show me photos on his phone, conference rooms, hotel views, even his name badge on a lanyard. I never doubted him. Why would I? He was a good father, a good provider, and he always seemed genuinely tired when he came home. He'd collapse on the couch, pull me close, and say, "I missed you guys so much. These trips are killing me, but they're good for our future." I believed every word. Until the morning of March 12th this year. I was at work when my phone rang. It was David's boss, Mark. His voice sounded confused. "Rachel? Hi, it's Mark from David's team. Sorry to bother you, but David was supposed to present at our big client meeting this morning and he never showed up. He's not answering his phone. Is everything okay? Did his flight get delayed?" My heart skipped a beat. David had told me he was flying to Chicago that morning for a 3-day conference. He had kissed me goodbye at 6 a.m., suitcase in hand, and said, "I'll call you when I land." I told Mark I'd check and hung up. Then I called David, straight to voicemail. I texted him. No reply. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I finished my shift as quickly as possible and drove home. The kids were at after-school care, so the house was empty and quiet. I sat at the kitchen island, the same place where David and I had shared countless cups of coffee, and opened the Find My Phone app we both used for family sharing. David's phone showed he was not in Chicago. He was in a small town called Port Townsend, about 2 hours north of Seattle. A quiet, artsy coastal town we had visited once as a couple years ago. My hands started shaking. I refreshed the app 3 times. Same location. I told myself there must be a mistake. Maybe his phone was stolen. Maybe he lent it to a colleague. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I called our neighbor Lisa, asked if she could pick up the kids from after school, and told her I had an emergency. Then I got in the car and drove north. The 2-hour drive felt like forever. My mind raced through every possible explanation. Affair? That seemed too cliché. Secret gambling? Drug problem? I kept replaying the last 7 years, all those business trips, all the photos, all the gifts. Had I been blind? When I arrived in Port Townsend, the sun was setting over the water. The app led me to a small, charming cottage on a quiet street lined with flowering trees. It wasn't a hotel. It wasn't an Airbnb listed under his name. It looked like a private home. I parked across the street and sat there for almost 20 minutes, heart pounding. Finally, I got out and walked to the front door. My legs felt like lead. I knocked. The door opened. It wasn't a mistress. It wasn't a stranger. It was David, holding a little girl who looked about 4 years old in his arms. The girl had David's eyes. And behind him, in the living room, stood a woman I had never seen before, holding a baby who couldn't have been more than a few months old. David's face went completely white when he saw me. "Rachel," he whispered. The little girl looked at me curiously. "Daddy, who is this lady?" The little girl in David's arms tilted her head and looked at me with those familiar brown eyes. The same eyes I had kissed goodnight thousands of times on our daughter Mia's face. "Daddy, who is this lady?" she asked again, her small voice innocent and curious. David's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. His face had gone from white to gray, like all the blood had drained from his body. The woman standing behind him in the living room, mid-30s, shoulder-length auburn hair, wearing a simple gray sweater, looked equally shocked. She was gently rocking a tiny baby wrapped in a soft blue blanket. I felt like the ground was tilting beneath me. The cool evening air from the ocean smelled of salt and pine, but all I could smell was betrayal. "Rachel," David finally managed to speak, his voice hoarse. It's not what you think." I laughed. It came out broken and bitter. "Not what I think? You told me you were in Chicago for a conference. Your boss called me because you missed the biggest client meeting of the quarter. And now I find you in Port Townsend, in a house I've never seen, holding a child who calls you Daddy." The little girl, she must have been about 4, tightened her arms around David's neck, sensing the tension. "Is she mad at you, Daddy?" David gently set her down. "Sweetheart, go play with your toys for a minute, okay? Daddy needs to talk to this lady." The girl hesitated, then ran inside. The woman with the baby stepped forward, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and sadness. "Rachel," she said quietly, "my name is Claire. I think we should all sit down." I didn't want to sit down. I wanted to scream. I wanted to turn around and drive away and pretend none of this was happening. But my legs carried me inside anyway. The house was warm and lived in. There were children's drawings on the fridge, a stack of board books on the coffee table, and a half-finished puzzle on the rug. It looked like a real home, not a secret love nest, not a sleazy motel. A home. We sat at the kitchen table, David across from me, Claire beside him, still holding the baby who had started to fuss softly. David reached over and rubbed the baby's back without thinking, the way he used to do with Lucas when he was an infant. "I never wanted you to find out like this," David began, his voice shaking. "I planned to tell you someday, but I was terrified. Every single time I left for a business trip, I told myself it would be the last time I lied." He took a deep breath and started from the beginning. 7 years ago, right after Lucas was born, David's company had a big layoff scare. He was worried about losing his job and not being able to provide for our growing family. One weekend, he drove up to Port Townsend alone to clear his head. That's when he ran into Claire. Claire was newly widowed. Her husband had died in a car accident 6 months earlier, leaving her pregnant with their first child. She was devastated, alone, and struggling with severe postpartum depression after the baby, the little girl named Sophie, was born. David said he only meant to help as a friend, He started visiting once a month, helping with bills, watching Sophie so Claire could sleep, bringing groceries. But the visits became longer. The emotional bond grew stronger. And then, Claire got pregnant again, this time with David's child. "The second baby, Ethan, is mine," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I found out when Claire was 4 months along. I panicked. I already had you and the kids. I couldn't imagine tearing our family apart. So I made the worst decision of my life. I created this double life. I told you they were business trips. I used company credit cards for hotels in other cities and then drove up here instead. I built a whole fake itinerary every month." Claire spoke up, her eyes never leaving mine. "I begged him to tell you many times, but he was so scared of losing you and Mia and Lucas. He said he couldn't bear the thought of his children growing up in a broken home like he did." I felt like I was drowning. Every business trip memory flashed through my mind in painful detail. The time he brought home a snow globe from Denver and Mia shook it for hours. The night he came back from San Francisco and made love to me like he had been gone for months. The weekends I was alone with the kids, telling them, "Daddy is working hard for us." All of it was a lie. I looked at little Sophie, who had come back into the kitchen holding a stuffed rabbit. She climbed onto David's lap without hesitation and rested her head on his chest, the same way Lucas did when he was tired. "How long have you been living here part-time?" I asked, my voice sounding strangely calm even though I felt like screaming. David swallowed hard. "I spend about 8 to 10 days a month here, the rest with you. I've been splitting my life in half for 7 years. Claire added softly, "He's a good father to Sophie and Ethan. He changes diapers, reads bedtime stories, pays for their daycare and medical bills. But he's also been a good husband to you. I know that doesn't make it right, but it's the truth." I stood up so suddenly the chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I need air." I walked out to the small backyard. The sun had set completely, and the stars were starting to appear over the water. I could hear the distant sound of waves. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my heart. David followed me outside a few minutes later. He kept a respectful distance. "Rachel, say something. Yell at me, hit me, anything. Just don't shut me out." I turned to face him. Tears were streaming down my face now. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Every time you kissed me goodbye at the airport, you were driving here to play house with another family. Every time you texted me, 'I miss you,' from a fake hotel room, you were putting another woman's child to bed. I trusted you with my life, David, with our children's lives." He looked broken. "I know. God, I know. I hated myself every single day. But I was trapped. If I told you the truth, I would lose you. If I stopped coming here, I would abandon 2 children who didn't ask to be born into this mess. I thought I could keep both worlds balanced. I was wrong." We stood in silence for a long time. The wind off the water was cold. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning in my chest since I saw Sophie's eyes. "Do you love her, Claire?" David looked me straight in the eyes. "I love you, Rachel. I have loved you since the day we met in that coffee shop on Capitol Hill. Claire and it's complicated. There's love there, but it's different. It grew out of guilt and responsibility. You are my wife. You are the woman I chose to build a life with." I laughed bitterly again. "You chose to build 2 lives." He didn't argue. That night, I didn't stay. I drove back to Seattle in the dark, crying the entire way. When I got home, the house was quiet. Lisa had put the kids to bed. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed I had shared with David for 11 years, and stared at the empty side where he should have been. I pulled out my phone and looked at the family photos on my lock screen. Mia smiling with missing teeth, Lucas covered in mud after soccer practice, David with his arm around me at last year's Christmas party. Everything I thought was real felt fake now. The next morning, I told the kids that Daddy had to extend his trip for work. They believed me. Of course they did. They had believed every lie for 7 years, because I had believed them too. But I knew I couldn't keep lying forever. Over the next 2 weeks, David and I talked every night on the phone, sometimes for hours. He told me more details, how he had set up a separate bank account, how he used vacation days and sick days to cover the time, how Claire had agreed to never contact me or the kids unless something happened to him. He also told me the hardest truth of all. Sophie started asking why she doesn't have a mommy and daddy who live together like her friends at preschool. She's starting to notice. Ethan is still a baby, but one day he'll ask too. I can't keep doing this to them. Or to you. I listened to him cry on the other end of the line, the same man who almost never cried in front of me. And for the first time since I knocked on that door in Port Townsend, I felt something besides pure rage. I felt pity. Not forgiveness yet, but pity for a man who had tried and failed miserably to love 2 families at once. The real twist, the one that would change everything, came on a rainy Thursday evening when Claire called me directly. She asked if we could meet, alone. I agreed. I agreed to meet Claire at a small cafe in Port Townsend the following Saturday. Neutral ground. No kids, no David, just the 2 of us. The drive up felt different this time. The rain had stopped and the sun was breaking through the clouds over the water. I kept replaying every business trip in my head. The way David would hug me extra tight before leaving. The way he always brought back those little gifts as if to compensate for his absence. Now those memories tasted like ash. Claire was already waiting when I arrived. She had chosen a corner table by the window overlooking the harbor. She looked tired but composed, wearing a simple navy sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. The baby, Ethan, wasn't with her. She had left him with a neighbor. We ordered coffee. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with the clinking of cups and soft conversations around us. Finally, Claire broke it. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I know you didn't have to, and I know you probably hate me." I looked at her hands. They were trembling slightly as she stirred her coffee. I don't know what I feel yet. Hate, confusion, exhaustion, maybe all of it. She nodded. "That's fair." Then she started talking. Her voice was soft, steady, but I could hear the pain underneath. "I never planned for any of this. When my husband died, I was 8 months pregnant with Sophie. The grief was crushing. I could barely get out of bed. David showed up one weekend by chance. He was walking on the beach, trying to clear his own head after the layoff scare at work. We started talking. He listened. He helped me with groceries, with doctor appointments, with the baby when she cried all night. He became my lifeline when I had no one else." She paused, looking out at the water. "I knew he was married. He told me from the beginning. I told myself it was just friendship, but when Sophie was 6 months old, I got pregnant again. It was an accident. I was on medication that interfered with birth control, and in the fog of depression and grief, we..." crossed a line. When I told David, he panicked. He said he loved you. He said he couldn't leave you and the kids, but he also couldn't walk away from a child he helped create. Claire's eyes met mine. So we made a terrible agreement. He would support us financially and emotionally, but he would keep his real life with you separate. He created the business trips as cover. I agreed because I was terrified of raising 2 children completely alone. I thought it was temporary. But years passed. Sophie started calling him Daddy. Ethan was born, and the lie became our normal. I felt a strange mix of emotions listening to her. Anger at both of them, but also pity. Claire wasn't the seductive mistress I had imagined in my worst nightmares. She was a widow who had been drowning and grabbed the only hand that reached out. "Why didn't you force him to tell me?" I asked. I tried, many times, especially after Ethan was born. But David was so scared. He kept saying, "Rachel is the love of my life. If I lose her, I lose everything." And I was selfish too. I needed him. Sophie and Ethan needed him. So I let it continue. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "These are letters I wrote to you over the years but never sent. I want you to have them. Read them when you're ready. They're not excuses. They're just the truth from my side." I took the envelope but didn't open it. Not yet. We talked for almost 3 hours. She told me about the everyday things, how David changed diapers at 2 a.m., how he taught Sophie to ride a bike in the backyard, how he cried the night Ethan was born because he couldn't be there for my labor with Lucas the same way. She described the guilt they both carried every single day. And then she told me the twist I never saw coming. "David hasn't been completely honest with either of us," she said softly. 3 years ago, he was diagnosed with early-stage kidney disease. He's been managing it with medication, but it's progressing. He didn't want to burden you with it because you were already handling so much with the kids and your nursing job. He didn't want to burden me because I was struggling with the babies. So he carried it alone, using the business trips as an excuse to come here for rest and treatment at a small clinic nearby. The doctors say he needs a transplant within the next 2 to 3 years if it keeps worsening. My heart stopped. David had been sick for 3 years, and I never noticed. All those times he came home tired, saying the trips were exhausting. It wasn't just the lying. He was physically unwell. Claire continued, "He loves you, Rachel. He loves your children. But he also loves Sophie and Ethan. He's been trying to be a good man in an impossible situation. I'm not asking you to forgive him or me. I'm asking you to think about what's best for all the children involved, including yours." When I left the cafe, my mind was spinning. I drove home in silence, the envelope from Claire sitting unopened on the passenger seat. That night, after putting Mia and Lucas to bed, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine and finally opened the letters. There were 12 of them, one for each year. Each one was dated and addressed to Rachel. The first few were filled with guilt and gratitude. Claire thanking me for unknowingly sharing my husband so she and her children could survive. The middle ones were heavier, descriptions of David's exhaustion, his tears when he left our house to come to hers, his fear that one day the lie would explode. The last letter, written only 2 months ago, broke me the most. "Dear Rachel, if you're reading this, it means the truth has finally come out. I'm so sorry. David is a good man who made terrible choices out of love and fear. He loves you more than he can express. He talks about you and the kids constantly when he's here. He shows me photos of Mia's dance recitals and Lucas's soccer games. He cries sometimes because he misses being fully present with you. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please, if David's health gets worse, don't let pride or anger stop you from being there for him. He needs you. Your children need their father healthy. And Sophie and Ethan, they deserve to know they're half-siblings one day, if you can ever find it in your heart. I'm ready to step back if that's what you want. I'll raise the children alone if I have to. Just please don't hate David for trying, however wrongly, to hold everything together. With deepest regret and respect, Claire. I cried until there were no tears left. The next morning, David came home. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He stood in the doorway of our house, suitcase in hand, eyes filled with shame and hope. Rachel, can we talk? We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we had family dinners for 11 years. The kids were at school. It was just us. He told me everything again, this time without holding back. The kidney disease, the fear, the love he still felt for me, the guilt that was eating him alive. I know I don't deserve another chance, he said, but I'm begging you for one. Not for me, for Mia and Lucas, for the family we built. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, counseling, transparency, even moving out if you need space. Just please, don't throw us away because of my mistakes. I looked at the man I had loved for over a decade, the man who had held my hand during labor, who had danced with me in the kitchen at 2 a.m. when the kids were babies, who had been my partner through every up and down. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, I whispered, but I'm willing to try. For the kids, for the life we had, and for you, because you're sick, and I'm a nurse. I can't turn my back on someone who needs help. David broke down crying at the table, real, ugly sobs. I didn't hug him, not yet, but I didn't leave either. That was the beginning of the hardest year of our lives. We started marriage counseling. David began the process for kidney treatment. We told the kids a simplified version, that Daddy had been helping a friend who needed support, and there were some big mistakes, but we were working on fixing our family. Claire and I met several more times. Slowly, painfully, we started to navigate this strange new reality. She agreed to reduce David's time with Sophie and Ethan while we figured things out. I agreed to let the children eventually know they had half-siblings when they were older. The twist that truly changed everything came 6 months later, during one of David's medical appointments. The doctor told us that I was a perfect match for a kidney donation. I could save my husband's life. Sitting in that sterile doctor's office, holding David's hand for the first time in months, I realized something profound. Love isn't always simple or clean. Sometimes it's messy, painful, and filled with secrets. Sometimes it requires impossible choices. But sometimes, even after the deepest betrayal, love can still find a way to heal. Not because everything is forgiven, but because some bonds are worth fighting for. I looked at David and whispered the words I never thought I'd say again so soon. I'm here. We'll get through this. Together. The decision to donate my kidney to David didn't come easily. For weeks after the doctor told us I was a perfect match, I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling of our bedroom. The same bedroom where we had conceived both Mia and Lucas. The same room where David had held me through postpartum exhaustion, where we had whispered dreams about growing old together. Now it felt both familiar and foreign. David never pressured me. He told me repeatedly that he would understand if I said no. "I've already taken enough from you," he said one night, his voice cracking. "I don't deserve your kidney on top of everything else." But every time I looked at Mia and Lucas, laughing at the dinner table, asking when Daddy would feel better, I knew I couldn't let their father die if I had the power to save him. Even after all the lies, even after the double life, even after the other woman and the other children. The surgery was scheduled for a cold morning in early November. The night before, the house was quiet. The kids were staying with my sister for a few days. David and I sat on the couch, a blanket over our laps, watching an old movie we used to love. Neither of us was really watching. We were just existing together in the same space for the first time in months without anger dominating every breath. "I'm scared," David admitted. "Not just of the surgery. I'm scared that even if I survive, you'll never look at me the same way again." I turned to him. His face was thinner now from the illness, but his eyes were still the same ones I fell in love with in that Capitol Hill coffee shop 11 years ago. "I don't know if I'll ever look at you the same," I said honestly. "But I'm choosing to try. Not because you deserve it, but because our children deserve a father. And because, despite everything, I still love the man I married. The one who used to dance with me in the kitchen at midnight. I just don't know if that man still exists underneath all the lies." He reached for my hand. I let him take it. The next morning, we drove to the hospital together. Claire had offered to watch Sophie and Ethan so David could focus. I didn't fight it. The lines between our two worlds were blurring in ways I never imagined. The surgery went well. Doctors said it was one of the smoothest kidney transplants they had seen. Within days, David's color started returning. His energy slowly came back. But the real healing, the one between us, was much slower and messier. We started intensive couples counseling twice a week. The therapist was a kind older woman named Dr. Patel, who didn't sugarcoat anything. She made us talk about the hard things, the nights I cried alone while he was in Port Townsend, the guilt David carried every time he kissed me goodbye, the way Claire had become both a burden and a strange kind of family. 6 months after the surgery, we had our first real breakthrough. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon. Mia and Lucas were playing in the living room. David was helping Lucas build a Lego castle while I folded laundry on the couch. The scene looked so painfully normal that it hurt. Mia suddenly looked up and asked, "Mommy, why does Daddy sometimes look sad when he thinks we're not watching?" David froze. I looked at him. He looked at me. I took a deep breath and decided it was time. "Mia, Lucas, come here for a second." They climbed onto the couch between us. I held their small hands and told them a version of the truth they could understand at their ages. Daddy made some very big mistakes. He was trying to help another family who needed him, but he lied to us about where he was going. It hurt Mommy a lot. We're working on fixing it together because we love each other and we love you two more than anything. Lucas looked confused. Mia, being older, looked between us with serious eyes. "Are you getting a divorce?" she asked quietly. David's voice broke as he answered, "No, sweetheart, we're not. But it's going to take time for Mommy and Daddy to trust each other again. And that's okay. We're going to do it together." That night, after the kids were asleep, David and I sat on the porch with 2 glasses of wine. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled fresh and clean. "I've been thinking about Claire and the kids," I said. "Sophie and Ethan didn't ask for any of this. They're innocent, just like Mia and Lucas." David nodded, waiting. "I don't want them to grow up thinking they're a secret shame," I continued. "I think, when everyone is ready, we should find a way for the children to know each other. Not as one big happy family, but as siblings who share a father. It won't be easy, it will be messy and painful, but it might be the right thing." David started crying quietly. You're a better person than I deserve, Rachel. I'm not doing it for you, I said softly. I'm doing it for the kids. All 5 of them. The final twist came almost a year after the surgery, during a quiet family dinner at home. Claire had come to Seattle for the first time. Not to stay, just for a short visit so the children could meet in a safe, controlled way. Sophie and Ethan were shy at first. Mia and Lucas were curious. The 5 kids played together in the backyard while the 3 adults watched from the kitchen window. As I watched Sophie laugh at something Lucas said, something shifted inside me. Claire turned to me and said, "Thank you for not destroying us, for giving us a chance to do better." I looked at her, the woman who had shared my husband for 7 years, and for the first time, I didn't feel hatred. I felt tired and strangely connected. "We're all broken in different ways," I replied. "But maybe we can help the kids not repeat our mistakes." David stood between us, silent, watching his 5 children play together for the first time. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, David and I lay in bed. For the first time in over a year, I let him hold me. "I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive you," I whispered into the darkness. "But I'm choosing to build something new with you. Not the old marriage, something different. Something honest." He kissed the top of my head, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll spend the rest of my life earning that chance. Every single day." As I drifted off to sleep in his arms, I realized the truth. Love isn't always the fairy tale we dream of when we say, "I do." Sometimes it's ugly, painful, and filled with secrets that nearly destroy everything. Sometimes it requires donating a piece of yourself, literally and figuratively, to keep the family alive. But sometimes, after the deepest betrayal, love can transform into something quieter, stronger, and more real. Not perfect, but ours. And for now, that was enough.